The rain hammered down in furious sheets, turning the narrow country road into a blurred ribbon of darkness and panic. Visibility was near zero. Wind gusts rocked the battered pickup truck as James gripped the steering wheel, squinting through the wipers, fighting a losing battle against the storm. He wasn't supposed to be here tonight. He was supposed to be home with his daughter, fixing the broken heater, maybe scraping together a half-decent dinner from the leftovers they had. Instead, after getting called in for an extra shift that paid barely anything, he was exhausted, cold, and his wallet was still depressingly thin. As he turned a sharp bend, his headlights caught a flash. A white sedan, crumpled against a tree, its front end smashed in. The hazard lights blinked weakly through the rain like a dying heartbeat. Without thinking, James slammed the brakes, skidding slightly on the wet pavement, and threw the truck in a park. His heart pounded violently in his chest as he jumped out, boots splashing into ankle-deep water. "Hello. Hey, is anyone in there?" he shouted against the howling wind. Through the fractured windshield, he caught a glimpse, a woman, slumped over the steering wheel, not moving. "Hang on, I'm coming," James roared, adrenaline crashing through his veins. He yanked on the driver's side door. It was jammed. Cursing under his breath, he ran around to the passenger side. That door was slightly ajar but jammed tight by the twisted metal. The woman stirred weakly, her hand fluttering against the window. A trail of blood leaked from a gash on her forehead. She was trapped, terrified, and very much alive. James didn't waste a second. Bracing one foot against the car frame, he heaved with every ounce of strength he had left, muscles straining, until with a gut-wrenching screech, the door gave way enough for him to wedge his body inside. "Stay with me," he said roughly, reaching for her. She flinched at his touch, fear clouding her glazed eyes. "It's okay. I'm here to help," he said, softening his voice despite the raging fear inside him. "I'm not going to leave you." The woman's lips moved, but her voice was barely a whisper against the storm. The car groaned ominously, shifting against the weight of the tree trunk. James knew they didn't have much time. Carefully, he unbuckled her seatbelt and lifted her into his arms. She was light, frighteningly so. The warmth of her blood seeped into his jacket as he cradled her close and stumbled back toward his truck. He kicked the door open wider and carefully laid her across the passenger seat, wrapping her shivering frame in the thin blanket he kept in the back seat for emergencies. As he turned the ignition, trying to warm the truck, she stirred again. Her eyes fluttered open, filled with a strange, piercing clarity. She reached for him weakly, grabbing his sleeve with surprising strength. Leaning closer, James struggled to hear her over the pounding rain. Her voice was a mere breath against his ear. "Don't leave. They're looking for me. Trust no one, please." James froze, stunned, the hair on the back of his neck standing on end. What the hell did that mean? Who was she running from? Before he could ask, her eyes rolled back, and she fell unconscious again. The storm raged on around them, but inside that tiny truck, something shifted in the air, a ripple of danger, of secrets far bigger than he could imagine. And for James, a broke, struggling single dad barely scraping by, this one act of kindness was about to pull him into a world where nothing was safe anymore. Not even the people he thought he could trust. The heater barely worked, but James blasted it anyway, trying to coax some warmth into the truck's frigid cab. His hands trembled as he adjusted the blanket around the unconscious woman. Rain lashed against the windshield, drowning out almost every other sound except the hard, fast beat of his own heart. Who's looking for her? What had he just gotten himself into? He didn't have time to think. She needed help. He grabbed his phone, but as he unlocked it, the cracked screen flickered. No signal. Of course. This stretch of road was dead for miles. His fingers hovered over the call button anyway, hesitating. Something in her voice, the terror in her eyes, gnawed at him. If he called the wrong people, if whoever was after her had power. The truck shook in the wind, snapping him back into action. He shifted into drive and peeled out onto the road, tires spinning in the flooding water. He didn't head toward the nearest hospital. He didn't even head into town. Instead, instinct drove him somewhere safer, somewhere he controlled. His cabin. It wasn't much, a half-falling-apart rental he could barely afford at the edge of a forgotten stretch of woods, but it was secluded, quiet. hidden. And right now, it was the only place he could think to keep her safe. The drive was harrowing. Branches littered the road, some crashing down dangerously close to his truck. Several times he had to swerve, his old truck groaning in protest. But he didn't slow down. Every second felt heavier, as if shadows were closing in around them. Finally, after what felt like hours but couldn't have been more than 20 minutes, he pulled up outside the cabin. The porch light flickered feebly in the storm's wrath. James jumped out, yanked the door open, and gathered the woman in his arms again. She was so still it scared him. He whispered soft reassurances under his breath, the way he used to when his daughter was sick, and carried her up the porch steps. Inside, the place was freezing. He kicked the door shut and moved straight for the threadbare couch, gently laying her down. Thunder cracked overhead as he rummaged through the tiny bathroom's cabinets, finding an old first aid kit. His hands worked automatically, cleaning the cut on her forehead, wrapping it in gauze. She flinched and whimpered once, but didn't wake. Only when he was done did he sit back, breathing hard, rain dripping from his hair into his eyes. For the first time since he spotted the wreck, James allowed himself a second to really look at her. She was young, mid-20s maybe, with fine features, pale from blood loss and shock. Her wet hair clung to her face, strands like dark silk against her bruised skin. Despite everything, there was something elegant about her, like she belonged in some faraway world he couldn't touch. He ran a hand down his face. "What the hell did you get yourself into, James?" he muttered bitterly. The answer didn't come. Instead, the storm outside grew even more violent. And then, underneath the roar of rain, he heard it. A low hum. Tires. Coming up the gravel driveway. James's blood ran cold. No one knew he lived out here. No one. He moved like lightning, grabbing the old hunting rifle he barely knew how to use. His mind raced. She had warned him. "They're looking for me. Trust no one." The headlights swept across the cabin windows, illuminating the peeling wallpaper and the terrified woman on his couch. James crouched low near the door, peering through a gap in the curtain. A black SUV idled outside. Dark-tinted windows. No plates. Two figures climbed out. Heavy-set men, dressed in black jackets despite the storm. They moved with precision, with purpose. Not cops. Not rescuers. James's stomach twisted violently. They were here for her. And somehow, without even knowing her name, James realized one thing with blinding clarity. He was already all in. He tightened his grip on the rifle, heart hammering so hard he thought it might break his ribs. The woman trusted him enough to whisper that warning. He wasn't about to betray that trust now, no matter what it cost him, even if it cost him everything. James crouched in the darkness, the old rifle pressed tightly against his shoulder, listening to the footsteps crunching on the gravel outside. He didn't know what he was doing. He wasn't a soldier, wasn't a hero. He was a struggling dad who could barely pay for his daughter's school lunches. But right now, survival didn't care about credentials. The men circled the cabin methodically. He heard a tap at the window, a flash of a flashlight beam slicing through the cracked glass. "Come on out, Mr. West." A deep voice called, calm and chillingly polite. "We don't want to hurt you. We just need what's ours." James's stomach turned to the phrasing. What's ours? They weren't talking about a wallet. They weren't even talking about information. They were talking about her, like she was property. The woman stirred slightly on the couch, a soft whimper escaping her lips. She was waking up. James had no plan, no backup, just instinct. Without thinking it through, he lunged for the breaker box and slammed the main switch down. The cabin plunged into complete darkness. He moved quickly back to the couch, crouching beside her. She blinked up at him, dazed. "Listen to me," he hissed urgently. "There's no time. Can you walk?" She struggled to sit up, wincing in pain, but nodded faintly. He grabbed a thick hoodie off the coat rack and pulled it over her small frame, tucking her hair underneath the oversized hood. Anything to make her less recognizable. A fist pounded against the door. "Last chance," the man barked. James gritted his teeth. He scanned the room, heart hammering. The back door. They wouldn't expect him to risk the woods in a storm. He helped the woman to her feet. She leaned heavily against him, weak but determined. Together, moving silently, they crept through the kitchen toward the back. The door's rusty hinges creaked as James eased it open. The men must have heard it, because a shout rang out. and then gunfire shattered the front windows. James didn't think. He pushed the woman outside into the rain and followed, slamming the door behind them. The storm swallowed them instantly, blinding sheets of water and howling wind masking their escape. They half stumbled, half ran into the dense trees behind the cabin, branches slapping at their faces, mud sucking at their shoes. Behind them, flashlights bobbed wildly, angry voices cutting through the night. They're on foot. Find them. James pushed harder, ignoring the burning in his legs, the icy sting of rain. He didn't know where he was going, only that he had to keep her safe. Minutes, or maybe hours, blurred together in a haze of cold and terror. The woman stumbled, falling to her knees in the muck. James dropped beside her, panting, shielding her with his body. "Can't run," she gasped, clutching her side. James made a decision in that instant, a decision that would define the rest of his life. He scooped her into his arms again, cradling her against his chest. "I've got you," he said fiercely. "I'm not leaving you." Carrying her was slower, harder, but he refused to stop. Somewhere deep inside, past the fear, past the exhaustion, he felt something else ignite. Fury. Whoever was after her, whoever had done this to her, had no idea who they were messing with. He wasn't just a struggling dad anymore. He was a man with something to fight for, someone to protect, and he would burn the whole damn world down before he let them take that from him. They finally found shelter beneath the skeletal remains of an old abandoned barn, half collapsed and hidden by overgrown weeds. James set her down gently, using a fallen beam as partial cover. She coughed weakly, shivering violently. James shrugged off his soaked jacket and wrapped it around her. "You're crazy," she whispered, her voice hoarse but touched with a ghost of wonder. "You should have left me." "Yeah, well," James muttered, checking the shadows outside. "I'm not very good at doing what I'm told." A small, broken laugh escaped her lips, brief but genuine. For the first time, James saw something spark in her eyes beyond fear. Trust. She pulled the hood back slightly, revealing more of her battered face. And she whispered a name. "Claire." James stared at her, stunned. He recognized it. Claire Donovan, the missing heiress, the daughter of the richest man in the state, the same man who had plastered her face across the news with desperate pleas for her return. Except the news said she'd been kidnapped, and now she was whispering, "Don't trust anyone." James sat back hard, his mind reeling. What the hell had he gotten himself into? And why did it feel like, for the first time in a long time, he was exactly where he was meant to be? The cold gnawed at James's bones as he sat hunched in the dark barn, every sense straining for the slightest sound outside. Claire Donovan, dozed fitfully beside him, her head lolling against his shoulder, her body shivering despite his jacket. He couldn't wrap his head around it. She wasn't just anyone. She was the Claire Donovan, missing for weeks, headlines screaming about ransom demands, conspiracies, and tearful pleas from her powerful father. And now she was here, hiding in a collapsed barn with him, terrified of being found. Something wasn't adding up. If she was just a kidnapping victim, wouldn't she be desperate to get to the police? Wouldn't she have begged him to call her family? Instead, she whispered warnings, terror flashing in her eyes at the mere mention of authorities. James stared out into the rain, heart hammering in his chest. He had to make a choice. He could load her into his truck, drive her into town, hand her over, and probably get a big fat reward check that could change his and his daughter's lives overnight. Or he could listen to the warning in her broken voice, the raw, naked fear, and risk everything. He didn't even realize he had made his decision until she stirred and whispered, "Don't leave me." "I'm not going anywhere," James said hoarsely. And he meant it. He just didn't know yet how dangerous that promise would turn out to be. The storm finally broke at dawn, the clouds ripping apart to reveal a bruised, angry-looking sky. James knew they couldn't stay hidden forever. They had to move. Claire woke slowly, her body racked with pain, but there was a new steel in her eyes now. She was a fighter, and she was done being hunted. They hobbled back toward town, sticking to the woods, avoiding the main roads. James kept an eye out for the black SUV, or anything else suspicious. As they walked, Claire began to talk, halting at first, then with growing urgency. "They're not after a ransom," she said, her voice raw. "That was a cover. My father, he's not the man you think he is." James said nothing, just listened, heart pounding. He's into things no one knows about. He needed me out of the way, permanently. So he staged the whole kidnapping. He made me look like a victim. But the truth is, he's the one who ordered the hit. James swallowed hard, bile rising in his throat. How do you know? He asked. She smiled bitterly. Because I heard it. I wasn't supposed to, but I did. His own voice, giving the orders. I was never supposed to come back. James stopped walking, staring at her in the pale light filtering through the trees. And those men, his private security team, off the books, trained to clean up mistakes. She paused. Like me, James felt the ground shift under his feet. This wasn't a simple case of rescuing a damsel in distress. This was war, and he was in it, whether he liked it or not. They reached the outskirts of town by noon, filthy, soaked, and exhausted. James guided Claire toward the back entrance of an old mechanic's garage he used to work at. The owner owed him a favor. Inside, under the cover of rusted cars and ancient equipment, they found a place to regroup. James scrounged up dry clothes, helped Claire clean up her cuts better, and found an old burner phone. He stared at it for a long time. One call. That's all it would take. One call to the wrong person, and Claire would vanish forever. Or worse. Instead, he called someone else. Ben Mathers was a grizzled old lawyer who had seen too much and trusted no one. A friend of James's late father. If anyone could navigate this mess without tipping off the wrong people, it was him. James met him in the alley behind the diner, Claire hidden out of sight. Ben's eyes widened when James explained. You're out of your damn mind, he growled. This is suicide. She's telling the truth. James said, voice low and fierce. I believe her. Ben stared at him a long moment, then spat into the dirt. Fine, but you better be ready, boy. If you're taking this on, there's no going back. James didn't hesitate. I'm already in it. Ben nodded grimly. I'll make a few calls. Quiet ones. Meanwhile, you two lay low. Whatever you do, trust no one. Not cops, not friends. No one. James clapped his hand on the old man's shoulder, gratitude choking him. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't completely alone. Back at the garage, Claire sat curled up in the corner, arms wrapped tightly around her knees. When James knelt beside her, she looked up at him, eyes shining with unshed tears. I don't deserve this, she whispered. You're risking everything for me. James shook his head. You deserve a hell of a lot better than what they did to you. She laughed weakly, a sound that broke his heart. Why are you helping me? James thought about his daughter, about how easily someone with power could crush someone without it. He thought about the nights he went to bed praying things would get better. He thought about the times no one had shown up for him. And he said simply, because someone should. That night, as the town slept under a veil of storm clouds, James sat guard, rifle across his lap, staring into the darkness. He wasn't naive. He knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Powerful men didn't like losing. And if Claire's father wanted her gone bad enough to fake a kidnapping and send killers after her, then he wasn't going to stop now. James had a daughter to think about, a life he could lose. But as he watched Claire sleeping, her face finally free of terror for the first time since he met her, he knew one thing for sure. Some things were worth fighting for, and he was ready to fight, to the very end. James barely slept that night. Every creak of the old garage, every gust of wind made him tighten his grip on the rifle. Claire dozed fitfully against the wall, but even in sleep, she looked ready to run. At first light, Ben called. They know you're helping her, he said bluntly. There's a price on your head now. James didn't flinch. They're calling you a kidnapper, James. News is spinning it. They're saying you're holding her against her will. James closed his eyes for a second, anger boiling inside him. Of course. Twist the story. Control the narrative. That's what men like Claire's father did best. What do we do? James asked. Ben hesitated. There's only one way now. Expose him. Get the proof. Show the world what he really is. And if we can't, there was a long pause. Then you better run. And don't ever stop. The call ended. James pocketed the burner phone and looked at Claire. She was awake now, watching him quietly. I'm not running, he said. Claire's chin trembled, but she nodded. Then neither am I. The plan was simple and suicidal. They would break into Donovan Industries headquarters downtown. Claire said her father kept everything, recordings, documents, blackmail material, locked in a private vault in his office. If they could get that evidence, they could burn his entire empire to the ground. If they failed, they were dead. They moved at dusk. James borrowed an old beat-up sedan from a friend of Ben's. No license plates, no trail. Claire tied her hair up, wore dark clothes 2 sizes too big. James did the same. They slipped through the back alleys, staying out of sight. The city buzzed with life, oblivious to the war raging in the shadows. At the towering glass building of Donovan Industries, they found the service entrance unguarded, just like Claire said it would be. Her father trusted too much in the systems he built. He never thought the danger would come from someone he called his own blood. They crept inside. Every step through the marble halls felt like walking into a trap. James's heart pounded so hard he thought it might echo off the walls. But somehow, they made it to the top floor. Claire used an old code she still remembered. The door to her father's private office clicked open. Inside, it was exactly what James expected. Sleek, cold, and full of secrets. Claire moved fast, going straight for the hidden panel behind the bookshelf. She keyed in another code. The wall slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a black steel vault. James held his breath as Claire punched in the numbers, her fingers shaking. The lock beeped, and the vault swung open. Inside were files, flash drives, photographs, enough to destroy 10 men. Claire grabbed everything she could carry, but before they could turn to leave, the door slammed shut, and her father's voice echoed through the office. Well, I knew you'd come crawling back, sweetheart." James spun around, rifle raised, but 5 armed men stepped into view from the shadows, guns drawn. Claire's father, Reginald Donovan, strode in behind them, immaculate in a tailored suit, smiling like a shark. "You really thought you could beat me?" he sneered. Claire stood frozen, her arms full of evidence, trembling. James stepped in front of her instinctively. Reginald's eyes narrowed. You're the hero, huh? The pathetic little mechanic trying to save the princess." He chuckled. "You think you matter? You're nothing. You're a footnote." James's jaw clenched. His finger hovered near the trigger. But shooting their way out was suicide. Reginald sauntered closer. "You hand her over now," he said, "and I'll let you live. Walk away. Be the smart one for once." James looked at Claire, at the terror and anger battling in her eyes. He thought of his daughter, of all the people crushed by men like Reginald, of every time he'd swallowed his pride just to survive. No more. He lowered the rifle. Reginald smirked. "Good boy." James dropped the rifle and swung. He slammed his fist into the nearest guard's jaw, spinning him into the others. Chaos erupted. Claire threw a flash drive straight into Reginald's face, stunning him for a split second. James grabbed her hand. "Run," he roared. They barreled out of the office, bullets whizzing past them, alarms blaring. Down the stairs, through emergency exits, heart hammering, out into the night. They didn't stop until they were blocks away, gasping for breath in an alley behind a grocery store. James pressed Claire against the wall gently, scanning her for injuries. She clutched the evidence to her chest, tears running down her face. "We did it," she whispered, her voice breaking. "We actually did it." James smiled grimly. "Not yet. We have to show the world." Ben was already waiting, car engine idling. They jumped in, tires screeching as they sped away. Behind them, the city burned with rumors. Behind them, Reginald Donovan's empire began to crumble. It took days, weeks. Claire went public, with recordings of her father ordering her death, financial documents proving his crimes, testimonies from people too scared to speak until now. Reginald Donovan was arrested. His empire collapsed. And James West, the broke single dad who had nothing but grit and kindness, was hailed as a hero. Months later, James stood in his tiny living room, staring out the window. Claire sat at the kitchen table, laughing softly with his daughter, their bond easy and real. He still worked with his hands, still lived simply, but he had more now. Family, purpose, and the knowledge that he hadn't just survived. He had fought, and won. Claire caught his eye and smiled. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. It was messy, painful, hard, but it was real. And for James, that was worth everything.